So it's this one up here is about LED and glare, and this is about the beauty of ambient lighting. So what do you guys over there want?
Glare.
Should we vote on it? Ah, we shouldn't. Now let's. I would love if we could we take glare first. Thank you. Thank you. I'll just go for that because it's like there was a CIE convention in Kuala Lumpur a little while ago, 2 months ago, and I traveled there to participate in that because my thesis when I left university was glare. And there's nothing as exciting in the world as glare. So you can forget about cars and women, it's glare, guys. That's what really is hitting it. So ever since I made my work there, it was I've been like a glare nerd. And if you think about that, most of the work that has been done was done in the 30s by Hopkinson, who made the glare formula, by Good, who made the position index and stuff like that. It's done on very few people. It's very old math. And at that time, there was like a globe, an opal globe, and the glare from a globe is pretty much the same from what angle you look at it. And there was this lampshade with an incandescent lamp inside. That was what was available. And the glare ratios from the 30s fit very well to that. The mathematic model fit perfectly. Then we moved to the thick T16 fluorescent tubes, low luminance surface, still very valid within the model. Then we moved to T8, slightly higher brightness. We had to put on louvers, double parabolic louvers, semi-diffuse louvers, all that kind of stuff to control it a little bit. And the validity of the UGR glare method was a little bit tricky. Then we came with T5, even higher brightness, even more challenges. And then now we are facing LEDs. There was metal halide and stuff like that. We don't talk about that. But Hopkins and these guys, they could not possibly imagine that a 1 square millimeter light source could launch that kind of lumens that it does. So the question is, are the methods developed in the 1930s still valid when we start to use LEDs? And we have to ask us that question because every day we are facing UGR documentation on LED fixtures, and sometimes the number that we get here, 19, doesn't really look like that when you look at the ceiling. And when we didn't come to any conclusion, it's like telling the point at the beginning of the story, but we just discussed this for a day, very inspiring day. And if you divide all products with LED for the time being, you can roughly divide them in 2 groups, the opal ones and the one where you can see the chip. In this case, should you choose a product like that and look at your documentation, you will not be facing any challenges at all. It'll work. So if the glare ratio for one of these products says 20 or 19, it'll feel like that. There won't be any difference if you take a 600 by 600 opal surface, put in 4 times 14 watt T8 light source, or you take in and put in an array of LED, as long as you have a high opacity in the opal surface. So these ones is a walk in the park. You can relax and carry on working with that. A little bell should go off in your mind if you can see the chip, because that becomes critical. Whether it's in a louver, whether it's through an opal or sandblasted surface, all these kind of things here, when you actually can see the dots, it's a little bit asking for trouble. Because there is a tendency that if you ask people, they feel like they are more glary than the numbers set on the documentation. I would love to elaborate a little bit on that. So this is the problem. If we have here like a 4 times 14 watt fluorescent lamps, or we have a very tight array of LEDs, we will have a certain luminous flux, a certain intensity distribution, and a certain illuminate area. You go over here, you will on average have the same luminous flux, the same glow, the same illuminous areas, and the same intensity distribution. Hence, the numbers in these 2 cases will be the same, but the feeling will be different. So right now, when I'm working with various universities where I have the pleasure of teaching, everywhere there's always a student doing some research in this. So there's a lot of projects going on because we know it's real, but we cannot put a number to it. We cannot actually put it on a formula. So you see, no matter where we go in the world, there are all kind of examinations carried out just last year. And this is actually the issue here. It's about how do we define the border of where to be alert and where to be attentive in this. I trust most of you know it, but being a glare nerd, I have to share that with you. You are always standing in a position like you are now. 160 if you're standing, 120 if you're sitting, always looking horizontal at a point on the wall. You always take into account the size of the light source and the position, how far is it from the center of your eyesight. And once you have that in your formula, you weigh it with the background luminance, and that's how glare is calculated. It's as simple as that. The issue is that many people think a product can be glary. Wrong. It cannot. It's always an installation because the background luminance is going into the formula. So it's not about. That's why if you look at a documentation on a data sheet, you cannot see from the product it would have a glare ratio of 19. That's rubbish because it needs to be put into some content. I've obviously noticed I'm here. So it's so they put it into a context and then work from there. Well, the case that was studied here was made this way, that you had an observer coming into a room. We placed an eye tracking device on the desk that sort of took into account where the person was looking. We asked them to look horizontally in a height of 1.2 meters towards a screen. We had a background luminance of 60 candles per square meter. Not a biologically active lighting system, but a very nice background luminance, and the glare source up here. So we had pretty good check on what we actually was working with. These kind of patterns was tested in this test that I'm going to share with you now, the results. Can you see anything from me? I'm standing in your way all the time. So these were the patterns that was tested in the ceiling. The office looks like this. This was built at Philips in Eindhoven, and around 200 persons was invited to come in and sit at this chair over here, sitting here, reading a poem on the wall, and retyping the poem on a Word document in front of the computer, and leaving the room. And outside the room there was a student asking them how they felt about the comfort of the light. So nobody knew when they came in that they should evaluate glare. So it was actually a surprise to them to answer that questionnaire when they came out. They might as well have thought they should answer anything about lighting levels or stuff like that. So once they left, what we wanted to examine was like the pattern. The first test was peak brightness. How does that influence the glare ratio? And the next was the balanced brightness. How does the luminous size? This is a 300 by 300 tile. And if you start to illuminate the surroundings, you get more and more uniformity. And how does that influence the sensation of glare? So if we talk about the peak brightness, you see over here we have a peak brightness of 10,000 candles per square meter in a uniform lit opal surface, and around 87, 88% had an acceptance, say, okay, we can live with that, it's not glary. If we go to large spots with a semi-diffuse surface and we increase it up to 60, between 30 and 60,000 lumen, when you measure the peak brightness within one of these dots, it's actually just as good or even better, more acceptance. The problem comes, the smaller the spots, the higher the brightness, the acceptance suddenly drops, so that people don't like that anymore. So this was the first test. The second one was about the area, or the balanced brightness. So if you of course have a small area, it hits the formula direct, so you go up to a glare ratio of 23, and only 70% likes that. If you go to the ratio here, 10 to 1, 1 to 3 and 1 to 1, it's pretty fair that people like that kind. It seems that the people dislike this a little bit more than the others, but on average it's a good mix with a UGR glare ratio of 19 and acceptance all the way up to 95%. So that's why I started off saying as long as you have opal surfaces, sort of diffused lit, it's no big deal. It'll hit the feeling of the glare. So when we compare both effects, what we should avoid are small, spotty surfaces, because if you combine them both, we are all the way down below 60% of the people, maybe a 55% actually accepts that. If you go for a homogeneously small one, you're up to 70%. And if you go to one of those homogeneously with a rim, you're actually all above 90. So that's the conclusion about it. As long as you take opal surface into account, you should be home safe and you can trust the UGR glare ratio. And it's in agreement with the formula. Now in our country, it's a legal thing. So if we promise a customer an installation with glare ratios less than 20, and we at the end find out it's 22, they can actually sue us for it. I know in many other countries it's not a legal requirement, but in our country it's the same as an average lighting level. If we want 320 lux here and 19 as a glare ratio, we have to deliver that. That's why it's very sensitive for us, because we can be dragged to court if we deliver an installation. And my mission, my message to our colleagues back home is that we have to be really careful if we do this, because now we cannot even trust our numbers anymore. So the issue here is, when should the bell in your mind go off? So if you measure the brightness on one LED chip and you compare it with the backlit or the circuit board where the chip is surface mounted on, if the ratio is bigger than 1 to 10, you're probably outside the validity of the mathematical method of UGR. So it's all about the uniformity, the average luminance on this print. So think about that. Maybe you can make these measurements and think, but if you just see it's too bright and too spotty, it'll be dangerous to work with. So our new product range looks like this, where you have like a opal surface and some microprismatic stuff. And these kind of fixtures from us or from anybody else actually fits pretty good with the new standard. And if you use it in a relatively bright installation, you use it whatever you do your lighting design, it will not cause you any problems. So my message to you tonight is just think about it if it's too dotted or too bright. It may not comply with the standards. So what do we do about it? We don't know. Because we were like a bunch of people sitting there for 6 hours discussing it, and a Japanese guy said, I will go home and push some numbers. Maybe we could add a correction factor so that if you have a certain ratio between the bright spot and the dark pauses between them, then you could correlate to a constant that would be multiplied, and you would have another one. But we are not even close to that yet. So for the time being, the documentation, it looks the same as it always has done. Okay? Good. I think so. Thank you very much. Thanks.